Playing baby. But Mom, Sarah exclaimed as her mother slid the diaper under her rear. No buts, her mother proclaimed as she taped the diaper in place. You were the one who wanted to be a baby. Sarah just lay there. Her mother was right. She had been playing baby. Truth be told, Sarah did not know why she had been playing. It all seemed so stupid. Both Sarah and her mother looked at each other. The story began to unfold. Sandy, Sarah's mother, remembered the day well. She had been collecting clothes to run in the washing machine and decided to grab some of her 13-year-old daughters from her room. She had not even bothered to knock, she just opened the door. What she had seen made her drop the laundry basket she was carrying. There was her daughter standing in front of her wearing a pillowcase like a diaper. To make matters worse, in her daughter's mouth was a pacifier. Sarah had jumped at the sight of her mother, spit the pacifier out and reached for her robe to cover herself. "Mother, don't you knock!" Sarah screamed. Sandy just stood there looking at her daughter. "Just what do you think you're doing?" She finally managed to get out. "None of your business," came the reply. Sandy found her voice. "It is to my business. My daughter is sucking a pacifier and wearing what might as well be a diaper, and I want to know why." Sarah looked into her mother's eyes. How badly she wanted to explain. She wanted to tell her mother how she missed being a baby. How much she wanted to be one again. But she couldn't. Her mother would never understand. All Sarah could think to say was, "I don't know." Sandy looked at her and, shaking her head, grabbed the laundry basket off the floor and left the room. Sarah collapsed onto her bed and began to cry. Her worst fear had come true. Her mother had seen her and now there was something between them. Meanwhile, downstairs, Sandy was crying for a different reason. What had she done wrong? Sarah had always been a good kid, got good grades in school. She had never been in real trouble. Sandy sat in her favorite chair and tried to grasp what she had just discovered. What had she done wrong? She needed to talk to Sarah, but that was not going to be easy. Silent tears fell down Sandy's cheeks. The clock ticked the minutes slowly. Time, it seemed, had come almost to a standstill. After a few minutes, Sandy heard the shuffle of feet coming down the stairs. Mother and daughter looked at each other. Both remained silent. Each lost in their own thoughts. Sarah found herself wanting to explain. Sandy looked her daughter over and was glad to see she had taken off the pillowcase. After a moment or two, both of them felt it was time to chat. "Mom, I think we should talk," Sarah began. "Just tell me why," Sandy responded. Sarah took a deep breath. "It's hard to explain," she began. "Take your time," her mother told her. After taking a couple of deep breaths, Sarah began to explain. She told her mother about her wish to be a baby again and how she did not know why. That she had felt this way for several months. She had looked up on the internet for information and discovered that she was a teen baby. Sarah was near tears when she finished. Sandy had listened to everything her daughter had said. When Sarah finished talking, Sandy took a deep breath herself and simply said, "Thank you." Sarah looked at her mother. A few quiet minutes passed between them. Sandy finally broke the silence. "I need to think about this." "Okay," Sarah responded. "I'm going to bed." And with that, Sarah shuffled off to bed. Sandy sat in silence and stared out the window. She needed to talk to someone. After a few minutes, she thought of her friend Violet. Violet was a trained child therapist. If anyone could help her put all this together. Sandy picked up the phone and made an appointment to see her tomorrow. After making the appointment, Sandy headed off to try and sleep. Chapter 2. "You don't look good," Violet remarked as she opened the door and looked at her friend. "I don't feel well," Sandy responded. "So what's going on?" Violet asked. Slowly Sandy began to bring Violet up to speed. She told her everything, from walking in on her daughter to the conversation afterwards. She even was able to talk about her feelings on the matter. Violet listened carefully to her friend's story. When Sandy finished, Violet spoke quietly. First and foremost, you did nothing wrong. Teen babies, or infantilists, are more common than you think. Nobody knows what causes someone to be this way. It just is. But what do I do now? Sandy asked. That depends on what you want. Violet answered. I just want it to go away. Sandy responded. Well, it won't just go away. But you can make it go away if you want. Violet said. How? Was the only words that Sandy could get out. Simple, Violet responded. Give her what she wants, but on your terms. What do you mean? Sandy inquired. Teen babies want to be a baby for real. Violet said. What I would do is make her a baby for the summer. The whole thing. By the end of summer she will be so sick of it that she will be begging to be a big girl for the rest of her life. I'm not sure I can do that. Sandy replayed. Sure you can. It's no different than taking care of a real baby. Everything is just bigger. I would add one thing to it. Violet said matter of fact. I would require her to come here and see me once a week. Why? Sandy asked. I can monitor her mental health and give her a place to complain about being treated like a baby after the newness wears off. Sandy thought long and hard about what Violet had been saying. It could work. She was not sure that she was looking forward to spending the summer changing diapers, but the reset of it sounded like the perfect way to deal with it. After all, if she had been caught smoking, Sandy would have made her finish a whole pack. Just one thing bothered her. What if this doesn't work? Sandy asked her friend. First off, it will work. Second off, with the therapy that she will be getting from me, she will want to give up being a baby for sure. Violet answered. After a moment of contemplation, Sandy stood up and announced. I'll do it. Good. Have her in my office next Friday. We will start therapy then. Violet said as she shook her friend's hand. And good luck. Thank you, Sandy said as she walked out of the room. She had some shopping to do before Sarah got home from school today. Sandy left her friend's office and headed straight to the store. There she picked up everything she thought she might need for the summer. She picked up a couple of bottles and a couple of pacifiers. She picked up 3 big cans of formula and of course she picked up a couple of bags of diapers. Soon she was arriving home. She was somewhat surprised to see her daughter home already. Sarah was laying out on the front lawn sunbathing. Sandy put her purchases away and then went to her daughter. Hi Mom, Sarah said as Sandy came into view. What's up? Nothing much. You're home early. Sandy responded. Half day. Sarah said. Well, I need to talk to you. Sandy said matter of fact. Sarah sat up and looked at her mother. So talk, I have been thinking about what you said last night. Oh, that, Sarah said, remembering the night before. She had hoped her mother would have forgotten about it. Sarah. Sandy started. I have been thinking, and if being a baby is what you want, then being a baby you should have. Sarah looked at her mother with a surprised look on her face. What do you mean? If you want to be a baby, then I am willing to let you be one. For the summer. Sandy told her daughter. I see. Sarah said with a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Now there are 2 conditions that I must insist on. Sandy said. First and foremost, if that's what you want, it must last all summer. There is no changing your mind after a week or 2. Sarah just looked at her mother. Could this really be happening? It would be a dream come true. Sarah simply nodded her head. And second, you must have weekly therapy sessions with Violet. Sandy continued. Why? Sarah asked. It's one of my conditions, was all Sandy said. So the question to you is, do you want to be a baby or not? Sarah stared at her mother for a moment. She was still trying to figure out if her mother was kidding or not. After a minute of silence, Sarah spoke from her heart. More than anything. Then come with me, Sandy said. Both of them got up and walked into the house. They walked upstairs and into Sarah's room. Sarah was shocked to see the bags of diapers on her bed. Lay down, Sandy commanded. Sarah sat down on her bed. Sandy grabbed a diaper out one of the bags of diapers and quickly put her daughter back into diapers. Sarah lay on her bed in bliss. She was finally getting what her heart had always wanted. The only thing that bothered her was the thought of talking with Violet about this. Sandy looked at her daughter and smiled. This was going to be fun on some levels. After finishing getting Sarah back in diapers, Sandy put a pacifier in her mouth and left the room. Sarah sucked the pacifier and smiled. She was a baby at last. Chapter 3. Sarah lay on her bed feeling things she had felt deep down come bubbling to the surface. The first thing she felt was the sensation of being diapered. She was in real diapers for the first time since she was potty trained at the age of 2. The diapers felt wonderful. She felt like her body was encased in love. She moved around just to hear them crinkle. Sucking on the pacifier was the second thing she felt. Her mother had given it to her right after putting her in diapers. Slowly she moved it in her tongue. True, she had sucked pacifiers before, but this one felt different. LT was special cause her mother gave it to her. Sarah smiled her biggest smile. A few tears of joy fell down her face. She grabbed her stuffed bear off her bed and gave it a big hug. The main thing she felt was happy. She was a baby again. Sarah slowly let the full reality seep in. School was out for the summer and Sarah had no plans. Now she was a baby again and looking forward to every part of the next 3 months. Downstairs in the kitchen, Sandy was busy working. Dinner had to be made and she had work to do. First she made a bottle of formula. Then she realized what she forgot to buy at the market: no baby food. Grabbing the bottle of formula, Sandy headed back upstairs to feed the baby. Sandy got up to her daughter's room and stood in the doorway for a moment. What she saw melted her heart. There on her bed was Sarah, clutching her teddy bear and smiling. Sandy knew that she was doing the right thing. She let out a quick sigh and entered the room. Sarah opened her eyes and looked at her mother. Sandy sat on the bed and before Sarah could say a word, removed the pacifier and replaced it with the bottle. Whatever Sarah was gonna say did not leave her lips. Instead, she sucked on the bottle and closed her eyes. The sucking of the bottle and the beating of her heart caused Sarah to get very tired. Soon she drifted off to sleep. The last thing she remembered was her mother checking her diaper. Sarah did not care at that moment cause she was fast asleep. Chapter 4. Sandy watched her daughter sleep for a few minutes and then went back downstairs to work on When the Baby Wakes Up. She needed to get a few things of the attic, so she made the climb upstairs. It took a good half-hour of work, but soon everything would be ready. Sandy sat in her favorite chair and thought about the coming months. She had to admit, when Violet had first suggested the idea to her, she had wondered if her friend has lost her mind. But looking at how happy Sarah had been while she drank her bottle made Sandy feel better. This plan of hers could work. Sarah seemed to relish the thought of being a baby and Sandy wanted her daughter to grow up. Maybe a summer as a baby would give her the time she needed to realize that you cannot always go back. Sandy sighed and started to think about what the summer held in store for both of them. The one thing that was certain was that things were never gonna be the same again. Upstairs, Sarah slept to her heart's content. She was having a wonderful dream. In her dream she was a baby again. Sleeping in a crib and enjoying every minute of it. She saw through the bars of the crib as her mother puttered around in her nursery. Does my baby like to watch mommy work? Her mother asked her. Sarah found herself giggling at the question. The dream was very relaxing. Like floating on a cloud. However, it did not last long enough. All too soon Sarah found herself waking up. She stretched and sat up in her bed, not a crib like she wanted but a bed. Sarah sat there for a few minutes and wondered what to do. Part of her wanted to throw some clothes on and go find her mother. Part of her wanted to just lay down and sleep some more. Sarah thought for a minute then made her choice. She was not gonna get any more dressed but was gonna go find out what her mother was up to. Sarah stood up and went to open the door. After leaving her room, Sarah headed down to the living room and to find her mother. Here mother sat in her favorite chair in deep thought. Sarah coughed to get her mother's attention. I see we are up from our nap. Her mother said as a greeting. Yep, Sarah replied. Well, what are you doing down here? Sandy asked. I came looking for you. Came the answer. Well, we have two problems then. Sandy stated. Like I said, if you are gonna be a baby you must be one full time. That means you do not leave your room until somebody comes and gets you. I know you do not have a real crib, but you do not get out of bed until I get you up. Understood? Sandy explained. Yes, Sarah answered. Also babies do not walk, they crawl. So I want you to crawl everywhere. Got it, Sandy stated. Okay, Sarah said. Now crawl over here. Sandy said. Sarah dropped to all fours and crawled over to her mother. Sandy reached over and checked her daughter's diaper. Finding it still dry, she then motioned for Sarah to come to the other side of the room. Sarah looked over to where her mother was wanting her to go and was surprised to see a playpen set up. Sarah crawled over to the playpen and was soon climbing in it. Once inside, Sandy spoke again. This is where I want you to stay while I make dinner. Sarah just shook her head. Sandy left the room and came back with a bottle of juice. This should keep you till it is dinner time. Sandy said matter of fact. Sarah grabbed the bottle and lay down in the playpen. Her only thought being that this just keeps getting better. Sarah looked around the room as she sat in her playpen and smiled. This was starting out to be the best summer ever. Sandy went into the kitchen again to try and figure out how to feed Sarah baby food when she did not have any. She thought for a moment about leaving her daughter and going back to the store but dismissed the idea. She had to think of Sarah as a baby and she would never leave a baby unattended. It was then that an idea hit her. Tonight's dinner would be mac and cheese. She could use the blender and blend Sarah's portion to the right consistence. Sandy began to hum to herself as she made dinner. She had not hummed in a few years and was surprised to be doing so now. It just seemed to make sense. She hummed a tune she had not thought about in years. Meanwhile, in the living room, Sarah finished her bottle and began to wonder what to do next. She looked around the playpen for something to look at or do. Finding nothing, she sighed a sigh of boredom. She had to admit she was bored. A few minutes later, she felt the need to pee. She almost stood up to go to the bathroom. She forgot for only a second. Still, she found it hard to wet her pants. After about 5 minutes, Sarah finally felt her bladder empty as she peed into her diaper. When she finished, she sat there and closed her eyes. The feeling of a wet diaper was different than she thought it would be. It felt warm and wonderful. The problem was that Sarah did not know what to do. She thought about calling for her mother. She also thought about getting out of the playpen and go looking for her. Sarah was not sure what to do. She was still thinking through her choices when she heard her mother's voice. Is my baby hungry? Yes, Sarah started. And a little wet too. Sandy looked at her daughter. She actually wet her pants, Sandy thought. No turning back now. Sandy thought through her options before speaking. Like I said before, you wanted to be a baby and babies wet their pants. They do not care and neither should you. I will change you when I realize that you need to be changed. Sarah just nodded that she understood. Sandy helped Sarah out of her playpen and walked out of room. Sarah crawled after her into the kitchen. Her diaper felt a little heavy. Upon arriving in the kitchen, Sarah was surprised to see a highchair set up. Sandy looked at her daughter. Shall we see if it still fits? Yes, Sarah answered as she climbed into the chair. To both of their surprise and Sarah's delight, she fit. Sandy tied a bib on her daughter and proceeded to feed her the macaroni and cheese. Sarah sat quietly and ate every spoonful. All the while thinking, my mother is feeding me like a baby. This is so cool. Soon dinner was over and Sandy gave Sarah another bottle to drink while she ate. Sarah sat in her highchair drinking her bottle and feeling a lot better. Soon dinner was over and cleaned up. So, Sandy said as she removed the tray of the highchair. Let's get you into a dry diaper. With that she took Sarah by her hand, walked them both upstairs. Chapter 5. Sarah and her mother arrived at her room and Sandy went to work. Sarah went straight to her bed and sat down. Sandy grabbed a diaper and then looked at her diaper. Not on the bed. Let's change you on the floor, Sandy said. Sarah got down on the floor. Sandy looked at her daughter and smiled. The plan was gonna work and Sarah had no idea how much she was gonna hate being a baby by summer's end. Sandy then bent over her daughter and gave her a pacifier. Watching her suck it just reinforced what Sandy was thinking. Sandy sighed and got right to work. First she removed the wet diaper. Then she sprinkled a bit of baby powder and rubbed it into her Sarah's diaper area. Then she lifted her diaper by her legs and slid another diaper underneath before bringing it up between her legs and tapping it shut. The whole time she was getting changed, Sarah had kept her eyes closed. Sandy wondered what her daughter was thinking. After finishing changing her daughter's diaper, she rolled the wet diaper into a ball and placed it into the trash. She then helped her daughter to her feet. It is too early for bed. So back to the playpen for you, she told Sarah. Sarah grabbed her stuffed bear and began to crawl toward the living room and her playpen. Once there she laid down and starting to play with her bear. Sandy sat in her favorite chair and watched her daughter play. She was so cute in some ways, Sandy thought to herself. Sarah meanwhile was thinking about other things. She still could not believe what was happening. Her mother had fed her dinner in a high chair and then had changed her diaper. She had her diaper changed like it was not big deal. Sarah laid down in her playpen, sucking her pacifier and playing with her bear. This was the life that she had always wanted. Her mind went back over the feelings of the past few minutes. She had felt her diaper rate before her mother changed her and it did not feel as nice as it did before dinner. Feeling the open air on her rear had been a nice change of pace. She had been surprised by the feeling of the baby powder. It felt wonderful against her skin. Then the fresh diaper felt like home again as her mother had taped it shut. She had felt encased in love one more time. Now she sits in her playpen playing with her bear and loving every minute of it. Sarah smiled and looked at her mother, who smiled back. Is my little girl happy? Mom asked matter-of-factly. Sarah just smiled her answer. Good, cause it's gonna last 3 months, Sandy reminded her. Sarah listened to her mother speak and the only though was simple this. Only 3 months, I wish this could go on forever. Sandy stared at her daughter for a moment. It was gonna take 3 months to break her daughter of this ridiculous idea of being a baby. But it would be worth it. After all, she would be starting high school within a year and she needed to be a big girl. She needed to give up this love of being a baby. Sandy looked at the clock on the wall. Time for bed, she announced. Sarah crawled up to her mother and the two of them walked up to Sarah's room. Sandy tucked her daughter in. I'll be right back, she informed her and left the room. Sarah just looked above her bed and smiled. Today had started out so terribly and was ending so wonderfully. It was hard to believe that less than 24 hours ago she had been discovered in a pillowcase of a diaper and now she was wearing the real thing. Sandy returned and placed a bottle in her daughter's lips. "This should keep you till morning." Sarah took the bottle as her mother left the room with a simple "good night." This had been the best day ever. Chapter 6. Sarah woke up with a strong need to pee. Sitting up in her bed, she almost got out of bed. An internal voice reminded her of the day before. She was supposed to act like a baby. Babies did not use the potty. They just wet their pants. Sarah relaxed and soon enough she felt her diaper get warm from her pee. The warmth overtook her. This was gonna be another beautiful day. After she felt herself stop peeing, Sarah laid back down on her bed to wait for her mother to come in and get her up for the day. Everything felt wonderful. Sarah looked at the clock on her dresser. 7:05 it read. Her mother would not be in until at least 7:30. That was another 25 minutes away. Sarah shifted her weight. The wet diaper reacted to her every move. Sarah stared at the open box of diapers sitting on her dresser. It would be a simple matter to grab one and change herself. The problem was that if she did that it would ruin the baby mode she was now enjoying. After all, she thought to herself, babies do not change themselves. So deep in thought about what to do was Sarah that she did not hear her mother enter the room. "Good morning, little one." Sandy spoke. Sarah almost shot out of her skin. "You scared me." "Sorry about that." Her mother replied. "It's okay," Sarah said as she felt her heart race a few beats. "Well, let's get you changed and then breakfast," Sandy said plainly. Sarah lay down on the floor as Sandy grabbed another diaper. In a quick minute Sarah was changed and both of them were heading downstairs for breakfast. Soon Sarah was sitting in her high chair being spoon-fed a bowl of oatmeal. The whole while Sarah was being fed she felt like she was in the best place on earth. This was the life she had always wanted and looked forward to in her dreams. She was looking forward to 3 months of heavenly bliss. Sandy was thinking also. Sandy was wondering how she was gonna keep this up for 3 months. Sure, things were just as Violet had said they were. Everything was just like taking care of a real baby, only bigger. Still, Sandy remembered taking care of a baby and it was a lot of work and very tiring. Still, when she looked into her daughter's eyes, she knew that this was the best thing to do. Soon breakfast was over and the dishes put away. That was when the question of now what came to both of their minds. Sandy had ideas. But there were things to do. Things that required them to leave the house. She had errands to run and the problem now was what to do with Sarah. Normally she would just leave her daughter at home and that would be that. But this was not a normal situation. Sandy finally decided to take her daughter with her. "Let's get you dressed for the day," Sandy spoke. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked with a hint of concern in her voice. "That does not matter. Babies don't care what happens to them and neither should you," came the answer. Soon they were up in Sarah's room and Sand was picking out an outfit for Sarah to put on. In a matter of minutes both women were dressed in jeans and t-shirts and ready for the day. Once they got out to the car, Sandy buckled Sarah into her seat and handed her a pacifier. "I want you to suck on this whenever we are in the car so you do not get fussy. When we leave the car I will put it in my pocket in case you get fussy while we are out," Sandy informed her. Sarah gladly took the pacifier. She loved the details that her mother was putting into this. She had even sat on her bed while her mother had packed a backpack with diapers and stuff. Basically it was her diaper bag. After a moment Sandy started the car up and they were off on errands. With each stop Sarah sadly took the pacifier out and gladly put it back in once they returned to the car. Sandy dropped off clothes at the dry cleaners. Mailed a package to her mother. then headed back to the super Walmart. Once there, Sarah once again took out her pacifier and both walked into the store. Sandy grabbed a cart and the two of them started at one end of the store and worked their way to the other end. Into the cart went baby toys, baby food, and a couple of boxes of baby cereal. With each item that Sandy put in the cart, Sarah got happier and happier. She was amazed at what her mother was going to do to make her dream come true. Sarah then watched as her mother went over to the diaper aisle and picked up 2 bags of cloth diapers and a few dozen pairs of extra large plastic pants. Sarah looked at her mother and wondered if she was losing her mind. Sarah liked wearing disposable diapers, not cloth. "Why are you picking up cloth diapers?" she asked. "Babies do not care what kind of diaper they wear," came the answer. Sarah looked a little worried until her mother reached into her pocket and flashed her pacifier at her. "Are we getting fussy?" Sandy asked. For a brief moment Sarah wanted to say yes, but something inside her did not want the world to know she was a baby. She just shook her head no. Sandy smiled and the two of them continued shopping. As they neared the halfway mark of the store, Sarah felt her tummy rumble. She had not thought of this. Thinking through what being a baby meant had not been high on her lists of things when she had said yes to her mother the day before. "Mom." "Yes, dear." "I need to go to the bathroom." "That is why you are wearing a diaper." "Mom, I need to poop." "Like I said, that's why you are wearing diapers." Sarah could not believe it. Her mother was making her poop her pants. Sarah just looked at her mother. Part of her wanted to scream with joy and part of her wanted to scream with horror. After all, she was a baby after all, and babies pooped in their diapers. It was while thinking about this that another cramp hit her. "Oh well," she thought and relaxed. Soon she felt herself pooping into her diaper. After she was done, she walked over to her mother and let her know what happened. Sandy led Sarah back to the restrooms and both were glad to see the family restroom was not busy. After locking the door, Sandy pulled out Sarah's pacifier to suck on while she changed her diaper. This was the big test, Sandy thought. Now she knew that the next 3 months were gonna be necessary. After all, Sarah was 13, not 2, and needed to be broken of this desire to be a baby. Soon a diaper was changed and both of them were back shopping. Chapter 6. Sarah woke up with a strong need to pee. Sitting up in her bed, she almost got out of bed. An internal voice reminded her of the day before. She was supposed to act like a baby. Babies did not use the potty. They just wet their pants. Sarah relaxed and soon enough she felt her diaper get warm from her pee. The warmth overtook her. This was gonna be another beautiful day. After she felt herself stop peeing, Sarah lay back down on her bed to wait for her mother to come in and get her up for the day. Everything felt wonderful. Sarah looked at the clock on her dresser. 7:05 it read. Her mother would not be in until at least 7:30. That was another 25 minutes away. Sarah shifted her weight. The wet diaper reacted to her every move. Sarah stared at the open box of diapers sitting on her dresser. It would be a simple matter to grab one and change herself. The problem was that if she did that, it would ruin the baby mode she was now enjoying. After all, she thought to herself, babies do not change themselves. So deep in thought about what to do was Sarah that she did not hear her mother enter the room. "Good morning, little one," Sandy spoke. Sarah almost shot out of her skin. "You scared me." "Sorry about that," her mother replied. "It's okay," Sarah said as she felt her heart race a few beats. "Well, let's get you changed and then breakfast," Sandy said plainly. Sarah lay down on the floor as Sandy grabbed another diaper. In a quick minute Sarah was changed and both of them were heading downstairs for breakfast. Soon Sarah was sitting in her high chair being spoon-fed a bowl of oatmeal. The whole while Sarah was being fed, she felt like she was in the best place on earth. This was the life she had always wanted and looked forward to in her dreams. She was looking forward to 3 months of heavenly bliss. Sandy was thinking also. Sandy was wondering how she was gonna keep this up for 3 months. Sure, things were just as Violet had said they were. Everything was just like taking care of a real baby, only bigger. Still, Sandy remembered taking care of a baby, and it was a lot of work and very tiring. Still, when she looked into her daughter's eyes, she knew that this was the best thing to do. Soon breakfast was over and the dishes put away. That was when the question of now what came to both of their minds. Sandy had ideas. But there were things to do. Things that required them to leave the house. She had errands to run, and the problem now was what to do with Sarah. Normally she would just leave her daughter at home and that would be that. But this was not a normal situation. Sandy finally decided to take her daughter with her. "Let's get you dressed for the day." Sandy spoke. "Where are we going?" Sarah asked with a hint of concern in her voice. "That does not matter. Babies don't care what happens to them, and neither should you," came the answer. Soon they were up in Sarah's room and Sand was picking out an outfit for Sarah to put on. In a matter of minutes both women were dressed in jeans and t-shirts and ready for the day. Once they got out to the car, Sandy buckled Sarah into her seat and handed her a pacifier. "I want you to suck on this whenever we are in the car so you do not get fussy. When we leave the car I will put it in my pocket in case you get fussy while we are out," Sandy informed her. Sarah gladly took the pacifier. She loved the details that her mother was putting into this. She had even sat on her bed while her mother had packed a backpack with diapers and stuff. Basically it was her diaper bag. After a moment Sandy started the car up and they were off on errands. With each stop Sarah sadly took the pacifier out and gladly put it back in once they returned to the car. Sandy dropped off clothes at the dry cleaners. Mailed a package to her mother. Then headed back to the super Walmart. Once there Sarah once again took out her pacifier and both walked into the store. Sandy grabbed a cart and the two of them started at one end of the store and worked their way to the other end. Into the cart went baby toys, baby food, and a couple of boxes of baby cereal. With each item that Sandy put in the cart Sarah got happier and happier. She was amazed at what her mother was going to do to make her dream come true. Sarah then watched as her mother went over to the diaper aisle and picked up 2 bags of cloth diapers and a few dozen pairs of extra large plastic pants. Sarah looked at her mother and wondered if she was losing her mind. Sarah liked wearing disposable diapers, not cloth. "Why are you picking up cloth diapers?" she asked. "Babies do not care what kind of diaper they wear," came the answer. Sarah looked a little worried until her mother reached into her pocket and flashed her pacifier at her. "Are we getting fussy?" Sandy asked. For a brief moment Sarah wanted to say yes, but something inside her did not want the world to know she was a baby. She just shook her head no. Sandy smiled and the two of them continued shopping. As they neared the halfway mark of the store, Sarah felt her tummy rumble. She had not thought of this. Thinking through what being a baby meant had not been high on her lists of things when she had said yes to her mother the day before. "Mom." "Yes, dear." "I need to go to the bathroom." "That is why you are wearing a diaper." "Mom, I need to poop." "Like I said, that's why you are wearing diapers." Sarah could not believe it. Her mother was making her poop her pants. Sarah just looked at her mother. Part of her wanted to scream with joy and part of her wanted to scream with horror. After all, she was a baby after all, and babies pooped in their diapers. It was while thinking about this that another cramp hit her. Oh well, she thought and relaxed. Soon she felt herself pooping into her diaper. After she was done she walked over to her mother and let her know what happened. Sandy led Sarah back to the restrooms and both were glad to see the family restroom was not busy. After locking the door, Sandy pulled out Sarah's pacifier to suck on while she changed her diaper. This was the big test. Sandy thought. Now she knew that the next 3 months were gonna be necessary. After all, Sarah was 13, not 2, and needed to be broken of this desire to be a baby. Soon a diaper was changed and both of them were back shopping. Chapter 7. Sarah sat in her seat as her mother drove back from Walmart, sucking on her pacifier and watching the cars go by. She looked over at all the bags that had been bought at the store and smiled to herself. Soon they were home and Sarah was escorted to her playpen. After unloading the car, Sandy brought a few of the toys she had bought and placed them in the playpen for Sarah to play with. That should keep you busy for a while. Sarah just stared at her mother. After a moment she began to play with her toys. Sarah must have played for half an hour before she got bored. Knowing that she could not leave the playpen, she simply laid down and fell asleep. Meanwhile, Sandy busied herself with housework. It had been an eventful day so far. Sandy finished her housework and made herself a cup of tea. Sitting at the kitchen table, she began to wonder if the plan would work. So far, Sarah had shown no signs that she wasn't enjoying herself. Sandy began to think she had made the wrong choice. After finishing her tea, Sandy wandered into the living room and the playpen. What she saw reaffirmed her resolve. There in the playpen was her 13-year-old daughter sleeping. She appeared to have been having the time of her life. Sandy just looked at her and wondered one thing. When would she tire of playing baby? An hour later, Sarah woke up needing to pee. Remembering here she simply relaxed and peed into her diaper. She then sat up and looked around. The living room looked the same as always. Her mother was nowhere to be found. So Sarah sat up and began to play with her toys again. The sad part being she was intellectually too smart for them and soon grew bored. So she just sat in her playpen, sucking on her pacifier and waited for her mother to come get her. A few minutes later, Sandy walked into the room. Sarah looked at her and smiled. "How is my little girl doing?" Sandy asked. "Okay," Sarah answered. "Ready for lunch?" "Yes, please." Sandy helped her daughter out of her playpen and both of them headed for the kitchen. Soon Sarah was back in her high chair, with a bib on, waiting to be fed lunch. Sandy went over to the cabinets to get a couple jars of baby food. She settled on a jar of meat, vegetables, and turkey and a jar of strained peas. Sitting down in front of her daughter, she began to feed her. Sarah took each bite and relished the feeling. Baby food tasted different. It was not as wonderful as she had hoped it would be. But it did not taste that bad. Then came the peas. Sarah thought for sure she was gonna throw up, but thankfully didn't. After the lunch of baby foods, Sandy offered Sarah a bottle of apple juice to wash it down with. Sarah had never been so glad to have a bottle in her life. She drank to her heart's content. Sandy meanwhile made herself a quick lunch and then cleaned up the kitchen. Sandy sat at the table and looked at her daughter. What were they gonna do this afternoon? It was while looking at her that Sandy had an idea. "Care to sunbath this afternoon?" Sandy asked her daughter. "Sure," her daughter said without thinking it through. "Then let's get you ready to go outside," Sandy said matter-of-factly. Sandy helped her daughter out of her high chair and both of them walked up to her room. Once there, Sandy had Sarah lay down on her bed and proceeded to change her diaper. This time, however, Sandy changed her into a cloth diaper and plastic pants. Once done, she stood her up and grabbed her by hand to lead her to the outside. "What about pants, Mom?" Sarah asked, noticing her clothing. "Babies do not need pants, so neither do you. Besides, we are going to the backyard, no one will see anything," Sandy informed her. Sarah shrugged and followed her mother's lead. Soon they were outside in the hot sun and laying down on towels to sunbath. Sarah closed her eyes and let the new feelings she had wash over her. Here she was outside in nothing but a diaper and a shirt. This was a strange feeling. She felt very weird. True babies don't care what they wear and neither should she, but something bothered her about it. She also felt the difference between the cloth diaper and her disposable ones. These felt different and the plastic pants made her feel a little hot. But this was what she wanted. She wanted to be a baby and was learning what that meant today. Sandy looked at her daughter and smiled. Sarah was in for a treat, that was for sure. Reaching over to her side, Sandy grabbed a bottle of juice and handed it to Sarah, who took it without asking. It was a sight to see for sure. Soon Sarah felt very tired and fell into a deep sleep. Sandy just lay next to her daughter, taking in the sun. This had to be the best part of the day. Chapter 8. Sarah laid on the blanket drinking in the sun's rays. In her mind was only one thought. This is the life. Nothing to do but lay here and relax. Sarah felt her mother want to put something in her mouth. Sarah just parted her lips and felt the pacifier enter her mouth. She began to suck to her heart's content. The day just passed away within this blissful feeling. The only thing that bothered her was the plastic pants. They seemed to keep a lot of heat, making Sarah feel very hot. Sandy looked at her daughter and smiled. She looked so peaceful. Sandy did not want this moment to end either. Mother and daughter moments like this were few and far between. Sandy let out a sigh of contentment. She looked over at her sleeping daughter and remembered times gone by. A little while later, Sarah woke up needing to pee. Without a moment's thought, she relaxed and emptied her bladder. The feeling of a wet cloth diaper made Sarah feel very uncomfortable. She tried shifting her weight, but nothing could ease her comfort. Sandy noticed her daughter's shifting. "Is the baby uncomfortable?" she asked, guessing the answer. Sarah just shook her head yes. "Well then, let's get you changed," Sandy said as she grabbed a diaper and a bottle from behind her. Sarah took the bottle and began to drink nervously. She could not believe her mother was about to change her outside. At least it was into a disposable. Soon the bottle was empty and her diaper was changed. The two ladies went back to sunbathing. The rest of the week was pretty much the same. Sarah stayed in diapers the whole time and loved every minute of it. Thursday night, Sarah got a bath. It had been years since her mother had bathed her and it was wonderful. The only thing that ruined the evening was her mother reminding her of the appointment to see Violet in the morning. Sarah did not see the reason that she needed to talk to a shrink. She was perfectly healthy and not crazy. Sarah laid in her bed sucking on her pacifier and thought about talking to the shrink the next day. It seemed so unnecessary. She was fine. Sure, she liked wearing diapers and being treated like a baby, but that did not make her crazy, did it? It was then that a strange thought crossed her mind. What if she was crazy? After all, none of her classmates in school were like this. Maybe there was something wrong with enjoying being a baby. What was she doing that was all that normal anyway? Sarah tried to convince herself that she was normal and that this was just part of who she was. Still, the thoughts keep her thinking. Very soon her mother walked in to give her a nighttime bottle. Sarah took the bottle and began to suck the grape juice it contained. Even as she fell into a deep sleep, her mind wondered, "Am I normal?" Chapter 10. Sarah sat in her seat and looked outside the window. She watched the other cars go by and marveled at them. They all were so lucky. They were not on their way to therapy. They were all off to exciting places. Exciting places being anywhere else. Sarah crossed her arms and looked at her mother. She did not have to take her to see Violet. She just wanted to torture her. Sarah shifted in her seat. Sandy looked at her daughter in the rear-view mirror. "Now don't pout," she explained. "It won't be that bad." "Won't be that bad," Sarah thought. "It will be terrible." Soon, way too soon for Sarah's taste, they were pulling up in front of Violet's office. Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and was about to open the door when her mother spoke up. Babies do not unbuckle their seat belts and open their own doors, she commented matter-of-factly. Sarah sat back down and crossed her arms again. Sandy got out of the car and went to the back of it. Sarah tried to see what her mother was doing but saw nothing till a moment later when Sandy came around the corner of the car pushing a stroller. Sarah could not believe what she saw. Her mother was gonna take her into Violet's office in a stroller, no less. Part of Sarah was overjoyed. After all, she loved being a baby, and this just added to the pleasure that was this summer. Part of her was little scared as she might run into someone they know. Still, Sarah remembered what her mother said. You wanted to be a baby. And she did with all her heart. Sarah then jumped out of the car and into the stroller. It felt different than she thought it would and was surprised that it fit her. Sandy pushed her daughter into the waiting room of Violet's office. She then sat opposite of her daughter and looked her straight in the eye. I know you do not want to be here. But this is for your own good. Violet can help you sort through some of your feelings about things and can help you become the person you want to be, she told Sarah. But only if you are completely honest with her. Sarah continued to suck her pacifier and just nodded her head. Sandy reached into the stroller and gave her daughter a big hug. Truth be told, she was not sure how Violet was gonna help the situation. When they had talked a week ago, Violet seemed to think that she could help her daughter get over this ridiculous idea of being a baby. Sandy sure hoped so. Still, looking at her daughter made her wonder if Sarah would ever be out of diapers and a normal teen like everyone else in her class. The two of them looked around waiting for Violet to come out of her inner office. After a few minutes, Violet came out and greeted them. Soon Sarah was pushed into Violet's inner office and with an embarrassing kiss on the cheek left in the room alone with her. Violet looked at Sarah. She looked normal. In fact, she looked as normal as she always had over the past few years that Violet had known her family. Violet shook her head and sat down at her desk. So, how are you doing? She asked. Okay, I guess, Sarah responded. Just okay. Yeah. So what's your week been like? What do you mean? Well, if I remember correctly, you have been a baby for the past week. Correct? Yes. So what's it been like? It was then that Sarah understood the question. She started to talk about the events of the past week. She talked about how it felt to be back into diapers and to needing to be changed. She talked about eating baby food and sitting in a high chair. With each statement, Violet seemed to have more questions. Each question was easy to answer cause they were all about the past week. It was a simple session, truth be told. It was nearing the end of the hour when Violet dropped the big question. Any idea on why you wanted to be a baby again? She asked. Not really. It's just something that I have wanted for the past year or two. Sarah answered honestly. She truthfully had no idea why the desire was there other than she really wanted to get what she was getting and was looking forward to the rest of summer. Well, we are out of time for today, Violet informed her. I'll see you again in a week, okay? I guess, Sarah told her. Violet then pushed the stroller out into the waiting room. Sandy stood up and taking the stroller from Violet began to leave the building. See you next week, Violet stated as they walked out the door. Sandy was not so sure. Violet had good intentions, but it seemed a little silly to bring her daughter in to see her. Still, she thought it seemed silly to be putting diapers on her 13-year-old as well. They had just gotten Sarah sitting in the car and was putting the stroller away when a familiar voice rang out. Sandy. Chapter 11. Mrs. Clattick was what you would call a busybody. She was always getting her nose into affairs that she had no business getting into. Sandy thought about her. There must be one in every neighborhood. Sandy turned and looked directly at Mrs. Clattick. Well, hi there, she said when the nosy woman was within earshot. I was just on my way into the store when I looked up and saw you. Mrs. Clattick responded. We have not seen much of you since the summer started and I was wondering if everything was okay. She asked in her usual nosy fashion. Everything is fine. We have just been busy. You how it is? Sandy said, trying to make pleasantries. Sarah meanwhile was worried. She had just gotten out of the stroller and into the car, it seemed, when she heard the voice of Mrs. Clattick. She hoped and prayed that whatever the crazy woman wanted would be over soon and they could leave. Sarah sat nervously sucking her pacifier and waiting for her mother to finish talking. Well, I need to be going, Sandy said. Of course. Mrs. Clattick responded and turned and walked away. Sandy looked as Mrs. Clattick wandered off and wondered. Has she seen anything? It would be so hard to explain why her daughter was in the stroller. Sandy got into the front seat and drove home. Sarah crawled into her playpen and lay down. It had been a long morning and she was tired. Truth be told, it had not been all that bad. Therapy had gone well. It was just the run-in with nosy Mrs. Clattick that made the day seem longer. After all, Sarah figured her mother could have embarrassed the heck out of her but chose not to. Sarah was not sure why her mother had shielded her, but was glad she had. Still, Sarah got to thinking. It had been a week since this wonderful thing had begun. She was in a constant state of bliss. After all, it had been her dream to be a baby again. Now she was one. Life could not get any better. Sarah yawned and fell asleep. Sandy looked at her daughter asleep in her playpen and worried. It had been a week already and Sarah seemed to be having a grand time of it. Sandy sat in her favorite chair and thought. She had managed to survive a week. But it had taken its toll on her. She had forgotten how hard taking care of a baby was. And to think there was 11 more weeks of this to go. Sandy began to wonder if it was worth it. She needed to make Sarah see that being a baby was not a good choice to make. But it seemed that Sarah was relishing every part of this little adventure. Still, it had some good moments. Sandy looked over at her sleeping daughter and could not help but smile. Sarah looked so peacefully and happy. It was hard to be mad at her. Making her happy was not a bad thing. Sandy sat up and shook her head. What in the world are you thinking? She said to no one in particular. Well, the time for self-examination was over. There was housework to do. Soon Sandy was busy with her normal cleaning routine. Sarah, on the other hand, was sleeping like a baby. Neither one fully aware of the changes that were taking place. Chapter 12. Sarah sat up in her playpen. It had been a couple of weeks since her mother had made the deal. The days were blending together. After all, each day was the same as the last. She was either in her playpen or in her high chair. She was even getting bored of being in diapers. Her day seemed to go from diaper change to diaper change. Still, Sarah was not ready to call it quits just yet. Sarah was very content. It was then that her mother dropped a bombshell. I'm going out tonight, Sandy told her daughter. Okay, Sarah replied. So tonight you will have a sitter. This piece of news surprised Sarah. Why did she need a sitter? She was more than capable of taking care of herself. She was about to tell her mother so when Sandy spoke. Normally, I would be okay with you by yourself. But you wanted to be treated like a baby and babies get sitters. Sarah just looked at her mother. So who is gonna watch me then? Sarah asked. I got a hold of Kerry. Her mother answered. Sarah looked at her mother. The only Kerry that Sarah knew of was her old babysitter from a decade ago. Kerry? Sarah inquired. Your old babysitter. Her mother responded. Sarah looked at her mother. She wanted to argue the point. That she didn't need babysitter. Still, it was hard to argue. She did need to be a baby. She was not sure as to why, only that she is filling a need in her life. Sarah looked at her mother and simply nodded in agreement. The rest of the day was pretty normal. Soon Sarah was waking up from her afternoon nap. As she stretched in her bed, she heard voices downstairs. Laughter could be heard as well. Sarah sat up in her bed. Were they laughing at her? Sarah started to cry. She was not some freak that deserved to be laughed at. Was she? Sarah just sat in her bed and sucked her pacifier as the tears fell down her face. She was just a normal kid who wanted something so bad that it hurt. Now she was getting that very thing, and it felt so good in so many ways. Yet part of Sarah was not sure. She debated going downstairs and telling them off when she heard voices coming closer to her. One thing was certain: her mother was not alone. Any minute now and she would be exposed to another person. Sarah took a deep breath. As she breathed out, her bladder emptied itself into her diapers. A second later and her mother opened her bedroom door. "I see we are up," Sandy said upon seeing her daughter. It was then that Sandy noticed the tears. "Have we been crying?" "Yes." "Why have you been crying, my dear?" Sarah looked at her mother. Behind her stood Kerry. Both of them looked concerned, and Sarah felt a wave of emotions come over her. Soon she found herself crying so more as she explained the reason for the tears. How she had heard the laughter and thought it was about her and how it made her feel. Sandy smiled at Sarah and brushed her hair out of her eyes. "Honey, do not be silly. We were not laughing at you." Sandy started to explain. "We were just sharing parenting stories and having a ball." "Parenting stories?" Sarah asked, and she dried her tears. "Yes," Sandy said. "Kerry here is a new mom and was sharing with me all the joys of having a newborn in the house. I was remembering when you were a newborn and sharing that with her. We did talk about your return to babyhood and Kerry is fine with it." "That's true," Kerry finally spoke. "I would never laugh at you, kid." This seemed to calm Sarah down a bit and she was able to stop crying. After a quiet moment or two. "So now what?" Sarah asked. "I am thinking you could spend some time in your playpen till dinner." "Okay. But first I think you need a diaper change." Sarah just nodded and laid down. This was another test. She was about to have her diaper changed in front of someone else. Sarah closed her eyes as her mother went to work on getting her into fresh pants. Now you may be wondering what was going on in the mind of Kerry. When Sandy had explained to her what was going on, she thought at first that Sandy must be joking. Still, standing there watching a preteen get a diaper change was not a joke. Kerry was not sure she understood everything that Sandy had explained, but figured that Sandy knew what she was doing. Anyway, soon Sarah was redressed and they were heading downstairs. Sarah walked holding her mother's hand until they got to the bottom of the steps. Then she crawled over to her playpen and crawled in. Sandy and Kerry returned to the kitchen. "So do you think you can handle tonight?" Sandy asked. "I think so," Kerry answered, her voice shaking. "It's really no different than taking care of my little one," she said, trying to reassure herself. "Really, it's not that bad," Sandy said. "I know it's a little unconventional. But according to Violet, this is the best way to handle things. I have done the research on the internet and I agree with her. Sarah thinks that being a baby is so wonderful. Like it's the best thing in the world, and I have to break her of that desire with a strong dose of reality. But what if after 3 months of being a baby, Sarah tells you she does not want it to end?" Sandy stopped and looked at Kerry. Truth be told, the thought had never entered her mind. Sarah might enjoy this for the full 3 months and want more. "That's a scary thought," Sandy stated. "I know, but what then?" Kerry re-asked. "Truth be told, I never thought about it. I hope she does not come to that choice. Hopefully she will be so sick of being in diapers and eating baby food that she will run away from playing baby. I hope you're right." Now hadn't you better get going? Kerry responded, not sure herself. Sandy looked at her watch and simply grabbed her purse and smiled. I should be back by 10. No problem, Kerry said. Then with a wink and a smile Sandy was out the door and on her way. Kerry sat at the kitchen table and wondered what to do. She was glad that Sandy was not sure of things. If it had been her, she would have gone crazy with the thought. Still, she was not going to have to worry about that. She was here to babysit and that was all she was going to think about. Looking at her watch told her all she needed to know. It was about 4:30. Kerry looked down at her own body. It was then she saw the spots. She was leaking. She had not remembered to pump and needed to as soon as possible. Kerry walked into the living room to get the pump that she had thought to bring with her. When she looked over at Sarah sitting in her playpen, sucking on a pacifier and looking ever so content, it was then that an idea hit her. Sarah, Kerry spoke to get the girl's attention. Sarah looked up at her. Come here, Kerry demanded in a somewhat sweet voice. Sarah simply followed the directions. Soon both of them were on the couch and it was then that Kerry dropped her idea on Sarah. I'm going to breastfeed you, okay? Sarah opened her mouth in shock. This was something that she never thought would happen. Why? She asked sheepishly. Because my breast hurt from all the milk in them right now. And you wanted to be a baby anyway, came the answer. Slowly Kerry undid her blouse and bra. She then coaxed Sarah's head and lips into proper position before telling Sarah to just suck away. Sarah started slowly licking her sitter's nipple. But once she tasted the sweet breast milk, she started to suck harder and harder. This was heaven. It was about halfway through the event that Sarah felt her bladder empty itself. She was truthfully acting like a baby and loving every minute of it. Chapter 13. Sandy drove in silence. She was deep in thought and it troubled her. It had been a tough couple of weeks and she was glad to get out of the house for a while, still some thought would not go away. Would her daughter really want to stay a baby forever? That certainly couldn't happen. Still the thought nipped at her mind like a dripping faucet that would not let go. She began to have images cross her mind of her daughter. She saw her daughter graduating high school and getting married still in diapers. The thought made her shudder. She needed to be sure that Sarah would give up this idea by the end of summer. Sandy parked the car at the front door to the restaurant and headed inside. Violet was already seated and motioned for Sandy to join her. Soon Sandy was sitting across from her old friend. Sandy sat in silence and looked at Violet. You're oddly quiet this evening, Violet commented. Lot on my mind, Sandy responded. Like what? Violet asked simply. Sandy took a deep breath and let loose. She told her friend about her conversation with Kerry and the concerns that Kerry had raised. She expressed her concerns that her daughter may never want to give this up and the fear that this brought her. She even talked about the image of her daughter walking down the aisle still in diapers. Violet listened to her friend and thought for a moment. After a few minutes she looked Sandy straight in the eye and simply said, So? What do you mean so? I mean the very thing you think I mean. If the summer ends and Sarah does not want to give this up, then so be it. It's not the end of the world. Are you kidding me? Not at all. Not the end of the world, it would be disastrous. Why? Well, Sandy stopped and tried to think of a reason. Truth be told, nothing was coming to her mind. Listen up, Sandy. You're my friend and I want what's best for you and for your daughter. Being an infantilist is not the end of the world. Sure, it's different, but it's not crazy or anything like that. The purpose of this summer is to help Sarah. Yes, Sandy interrupted. To help her get rid of this desire to be a baby and grow up. No, Violet said. The purpose was to get her to be okay with what she is and wants. You hope that this is to give them up for good. That's your feeling and it may in fact be hers. But she has to come to the decision all on her own. Otherwise it will do more harm than good in the long run. But I don't want my baby in diapers for the rest of her life. Your baby may in fact be in diapers for the rest of her life and that's okay. At the end of the summer she will just have to learn how to take care of herself and not have you to help her. Sandy sat in silence and thought through what Violet was saying. It made sense to her in some manner and she was begging to see the light of the conversation. As dinner was winding up, Sandy remembered something that Sarah and she did every year during 4th of July. An idea popped into her head. This would cure Sarah of her baby desire once and for all. Standing up, Sandy looked at her friend. I just cannot have that in my life. She will give it up if I have to force it out of her, she said with assurance and walked away. Violet grabbed the check and watched her friend leave. God help her, she thought as she reached into her purse to grab her credit card. A pacifier fell out onto the table. Violet quickly picked it up and went to pay the check. Chapter 14. Sandy walked around the house like a busy little bee. She had a lot to do if they were going to go. And she wanted to go. She wanted to go more than anything. What fueled this desire was something simple. She wanted her teenage daughter to be just that, a teenager. Not some diaper-wearing baby. Sarah sat in her playpen and watched her mom scurry around. Something is up, she told herself and began to wonder what. Sandy went about the day working on packing up to leave for the 4-day 4th of July weekend that was coming up. Soon she had everything in order. She just had one more thing to do. Calmly she sat in her favorite chair and looked at her daughter. Sarah just smiled. Sandy reached for the phone and called her mother. This was gonna be a tough one to explain and she needed to explain it. Grabbing the cordless phone, she walked out of the room. She did not want her daughter hearing the conversation. Sarah sat in her playpen and wondered what was up. Her mother had not been that jumpy in a long time. She only gets jumpy like that when she has to deal with her mother. That was when Sarah started to put 2 and 2 together. For as long as she could remember, she and her mother had gone to visit her mother for 4th of July weekend. It was a big deal of the summer and Sarah looked forward to it. It was a time to see Grandma and her cousins and the rest of the family that lived close by. Sarah suddenly had a thought. Her mother was gonna go this year like always. She was gonna have to be a baby with all of her relatives nearby. This thought made her shudder and worry. She was okay with her baby self, but to expose it to others would be tough. She had only been able to show it to her mother because of what happened. She was not sure she could expose it to the whole family, as it were. Sarah was deep in this thought when her mother spoke to her. Sarah. Hearing her name made her jump. Sorry, did not mean to scare you. Are you ready to go? Her mother asked. Go where? Sarah tried to ask innocently. You know where, came the answer. So it was true, Sarah was gonna be a baby to her whole family. But Mom, Sarah started to say. Do not but Mom me. Sandy cut her off. You wanted to be a baby and I told you that was okay, but it had to be for the summer. You know we go to Grandma's house every year. Did you think I would cancel just cause you're in diapers? Well, yeah, Sarah said matter-of-factly. Well, you were wrong. Sandy continued. I am perfectly willing to take my baby daughter to visit her grandma and anyone else who happens to be there. You wanted to be a baby and so a baby you are. That means wherever we go. So suck it up. Now do you need to be changed? I don't think so, came the answer. Sandy just shook her head and walked over to her daughter to check for herself. Sarah, you're soaked. Let's get you changed and then we are out of here. The two of them made their way up to Sarah's room and soon a diaper was changed and they were both in the car heading the 6 hours to Grandma's house. Both of them completely unaware as to how the weekend would turn out. both worried for their own reasons as to what the weekend meant. Chapter 15. The drive to Grandma's house was a long one. It takes 6 hours to get there and both of them sat in silence. Sandy had handed Sarah her pacifier as they pulled out of the driveway and Sarah sat sucking it, a little nervous. She was mostly worried about the other cars passing by. She was sure they could see her sitting there sucking on a pacifier. Sarah was deep in thoughts. She was not sure she wanted to go to Grandma's house. After all, for the past month she had been enjoying being a baby in private. Now she was gonna have to be one in a very public situation. She was going to be in diapers in front of her grandmother and all her cousins. This bothered her and she was not sure why. After all, she wanted to be a baby with all her heart. Something just did not seem right at the moment. Sandy was thinking about different things. Other than watching the road, she wondered if this trip was gonna be the relaxing vacation they were used to. Probably not, she reasoned as she pulled onto the highway. Sarah continued to suck on her pacifier. Sandy looked at her daughter and smiled. She looked good today, sitting in the passenger seat in a pink tank top and pair of jeans. Her diaper poking out of the top. Truth be told, she looked cute. Sandy wondered again about her daughter. Would she give it up at the end of summer, or would she want to be in diapers for the rest of her life? Sandy had to admit she wasn't sure. So, Sandy spoke, breaking the silence. Has the summer been all you hoped it would be? What do you mean? Well, have you enjoyed being a baby again? Sarah looked at her mother. It's been okay, I guess. Just okay? Well, it's kinda boring. I see. Well, I can see that. After all, you are a teenager on some level. Still, this is what you wanted. I know, Mom. A silence fell over the car. Both of them thinking about the situation. Sarah started to think about being a baby full-time. True, she was enjoying everything, but it was no longer fun. It had become very mundane. It felt like the joy was gone. Sarah wondered how she would feel in a month. She wanted to go back to school. She liked school. Still, she liked being a baby as well. She wondered if she could somehow have both. Still, that was a month from now. Till then she was a baby full-time. Sarah sighed as she felt her bladder give way. Wetting her diapers was getting easier. Possibly too easy, Sarah thought. She began to wonder if she was losing control. A thought that scared her. After all, she did not want diapers to be something other than a choice. Sandy listened to her heartbeat as she drove. The call to her mother about Sarah's choice was deep in her mind. She had tried to explain it, but somehow she got the feeling that her mother did not get it. Either way, they would find out at the end of the road trip. Sandy sat in the silence and wondered what her daughter was thinking. Was she worried about being a baby in front of everyone? It did not really matter, as Sandy was determined to keep her daughter as a baby till summer's end in hopes of breaking her of the idea for the rest of her life. She also thought about what Violet had said when they had dinner. Was it really about making Sarah okay with who she is? As this thought nagged at her, Sandy began to sense something she had not sensed in years. It had been a long time since Sandy had been able to sense when she needed to change Sarah. The sense had been coming back during the past month. Spotting a rest area, Sandy pulled the minivan over into a secluded spot. What's going on? Sarah asked as the car was parked. You need to be changed. Sandy responded. How did you know? A mother always knows when her baby needs to be changed. Soon Sarah was laying down in the middle seat of the minivan and her diaper was changed. As soon as she was back in her seat, Sandy looked at her with a straight face. Are you hungry? She asked her daughter. Not really. More thirsty, came the answer. Sandy reached into the diaper bag and pulled out an empty bottle and a can of formula. In a couple of seconds, Sandy handed her somewhat surprised daughter a bottle full of formula and simply said, "Drink up." With that, Sandy climbed into the front seat and pulled out of the rest area, and they were on their way again to Grandma's house. The rest of the trip went by uneventful. They did stop for lunch at a McDonald's and soon they arrived at Grandma's house. One thing bothered Sarah as they pulled up. She had to poop really badly. She hoped to hold it for as long as possible. Why, she was not sure. As they approached the door to the house, Sarah felt her bladder give way as she soaked her diaper. Grandma opened the door and with a big hug greeted each of them. As she hugged Sarah, the concentration Sarah had loosened and Sarah proceeded to poop into her diaper. Chapter 16. Sarah hugged her grandmother nervously. She was well aware of her present state. "Hello Sarah, my how you have grown," Grandma said. It was at that moment that the smell hit everyone's nose. "Smells like I have to change someone." Sandy spoke up. "You mean she is actually in diapers?" Grandmother inquired. "Yes, Mother. I told you all about it on the phone. Sarah is a baby for the summer." "I thought you were kidding." "Well, I wasn't." Grandma stood and looked at her daughter and granddaughter for a moment. She had the feeling of someone trying to grasp a difficult concept and not getting it. "Well," she said after a moment, "the guest room is yours." "Thank you, Mom," Sandy responded as she whisked Sarah inside for a much-needed diaper change. Soon a diaper was changed and Sarah sat up on the bed. Sandy sat down on the bed and looked at her daughter. "I want you to stay here for a few minutes. Your grandmother and I need to talk in private." "Okay. Okay, Mom." With that, Sandy placed a pacifier in Sarah's lips and left. Sarah laid back down and began to think about what the weekend held. She was not sure about anything anymore. She had wanted to be in diapers and be a baby for so long, and now some of it was starting to rub her the wrong way. She saw the strange look in grandmother's eyes and knew that tomorrow she would see the same look in everyone's eyes. It began to make her feel very uncomfortable. Sarah started to cry a little at the thought of what was coming. Part of her tears were for sadness and surprising part of them were for joy. She wanted to be a baby and from the looks of it got exactly what she wanted. Sarah wondered what they were talking about in the other room. Sarah strained her ears to try and pick up the conversation. But all she could hear was mumbles. Their voices were not loud enough to pick up and distinct words. It was then she heard her mother plain as day scream. "I want my daughter to get over the idea of being a baby, and if this is the best way to do it, I will." Sarah was shocked. She thought her mother was doing this out of love. Instead, she was doing this out of something else altogether. Sarah lay back in the bed and cried herself to sleep. A while later, Sarah woke up and looked around her. Her mother was looking at her and smiling. "Are you okay, honey?" Sandy asked. Sarah wanted so badly to tell her mother off. After all, she had just learned that her mother was punishing her with baby treatment, not loving her with it. But looking into her mother's eyes at that moment, all she could think to say was, "I'm fine. Good, everyone is downstairs waiting for you." "Everyone?" Sarah said apprehensively. "Yes, everyone, now let's get you changed and downstairs." It was then that Sarah realized she was soaking wet. Soon she was in dry diapers and her mother was helping her to her feet. "Mom, yes dear, what about pants?" "Honey, it's too hot for pant, and besides, babies often run around in just diapers and a t-shirt, and you are a baby for the summer." Sarah looked at her mother in shock. She actually was gonna let her wear just diapers. Sarah was not sure about this. She had hoped to hide her baby state a little bit. Now it was gonna be on display for everyone to see. Sarah slowly left the guest room and headed down the hall to the main living room. She could hear everyone talking as she approached the room and felt a quiet when she entered into the room. Everyone looked up and saw her enter the room. It seemed like forever with everyone staring at her. But in reality it was only a second. Soon a strong man stood up from his comfy chair and walked over to Sarah. He reached out and gave her a big bear hug. "I thought you were gonna sleep the whole weekend away, Sarah." Not a chance, Uncle Jack, Sarah answered. That seemed to release the tension in the room. Soon everyone was hugging her and talking about stuff. The fact that she was standing there wearing nothing but a diaper and a t-shirt was not even brought up. Soon everyone settled back down in their chairs and Sarah looked around the room for a place to sit. Over here, her mother called her. Sarah looked over and was surprised to see a playpen set up. Course, she thought as she walked over and climbed in. The conversations that were happening before Sarah walked into the room resumed and Sarah just sat in her playpen and listened. Sarah would learn later that Grandma with her mother's help had explained to everyone what was going on and that everyone had agreed to keep things as normal as possible. Otherwise Sarah and Sandy would have left and that would have been sad. Chapter 17. Sandy slowly pulled into the driveway. It had been a good weekend. Still, she was glad it was over. After turning off the car, Sandy looked over at her sleeping daughter. Sarah was sound asleep, sucking on her pacifier. Sandy had to admit she looked peaceful. Just like she did as a baby all those years ago. Sarah stirred in her seat. "We home?" she asked sleepily. "Yes. Let's get you upstairs to bed." Soon, Sarah was upstairs and sound asleep. Sandy was soon climbing into bed. Laying under the covers, she stared at the wall. Sandy had to wonder. It seemed like everything she tried to do to get her daughter to grow up had failed. Her family had been no hope at all. Sandy was beginning to think her daughter would never be a normal teenager. She even began to imagine her daughter in many stages still wearing diapers. Stages like going to school, learning to drive, going on dates, going to prom, all the while Sarah was well diapered. A few tears fell from her eyes. No, she thought. There had to be a way. She just could not let this happen. Sandy slowly brushed the tears from her eyes. Soon Sandy was falling asleep. The next morning Sarah woke up to a very wet diaper. Laying in bed, Sarah began to think. Okay, it was more like worry. She had been waking up wet the past month. She had also been wetting her diapers without trying. This worried Sarah. After all, even Sarah knew she could not stay in diapers after the summer ended. Sarah was even looking forward to school in the fall. She was looking forward to joining cheerleading team again. Something she could never do if she was still in diapers. Still, she loved being a baby. She loved the feeling of being in diapers and being taken care of. The conflict inside her made her cry. After all, part of her wanted to go out and spend the month hanging around with kids her own ago. Maybe hook up with a friend or two. But that would mean that she would have to give up wearing diapers and being a baby. Could she really do that? Finally, Sandy walked into the room. Sarah sat up and came to a decision. She was done with being a baby and wanted to go out and be a teenager for the last month of summer. She looked directly at her mother and told her so. No. What do you mean no? I told you when this first started that if you wanted to be a baby then it was for the whole summer. I meant it then and I mean it now. But Mom, Sarah exclaimed as her mother slid the diaper under her rear. No buts, her mother proclaimed as she taped the diaper in place. You were the one who wanted to be a baby. Sarah just lay there. Her mother was right. She had been playing baby. Truth be told, Sarah did not know why she had been playing. It all seemed so stupid. Sarah was tired of being a baby. She was tired of wearing diapers and spending all day in that playpen. But the look her mother gave told her she would have no choice. Summer would not end for 4 more weeks. She was stuck in the life of a baby until the first day of school. Which Sarah felt in that moment could not come soon enough. Sandy had a different thought going through her mind. The thought was one simple word: finally. Chapter 18 Conclusion. It had been a long summer in some ways. Still, as Sarah lay in her bed waiting for her mother to come in and remove her wet diaper, Sarah hoped her mother would hurry as she did not want to be late on the first day of school. Sarah should not have worried. Sandy opened the door and looked into Sarah's room. "Why aren't you in the shower yet?" "I was waiting for you. My days of diapering you are over. Get up." Sarah got out of bed and went to take a shower. The whole time she was washing, her mind was a mess. The summer was over and she was back being a normal teenager. This made her feel strange. Part of her was happy to be going to school. She had missed her friends over the summer and was looking forward to catching up. Not that she was going to tell them about her summer. The other thing she was feeling was a sadness. She had loved so much being in diapers and everything. Sure, it was hard the past month, but for the most part it had been fun. But that time was over and she had better get on with it. Sarah got out of the shower and wrapped a towel and went back to her room. Meanwhile, Sandy was doing some thinking of her own. The past month had indeed been a tough one for reasons that were beyond explaining. Sandy had talked to Violet about many things and had come to some startling realizations about what her daughter meant when she said she was a teen baby. Still, the time for her to be a baby was over. At least for now. School started today and Sandy was worried about other things. She was thinking about those other things when Sarah walked back into her room. "Mom, can I get a little privacy, please?" "In a minute. We need to talk." Sarah looked at her mother and simply sat down on the bed. "So talk. Honey. I need you to understand that I love you. I know this last month was tough on you and I did it for a reason. You needed to see that you can not just be a baby anymore." "I do, Mother. I am not done. You needed also to understand that you are a teenager and a baby at the same time. During this summer you got to explore what it means to be a baby and hopefully you know how much of a baby you want to be." "I guess so." "Good. Now, however, you need to be a teenager and go to school and get good grades and all the other stuff. This does not mean that you need to give up being a baby. While I was babying you this summer, I was also reading a lot online. I learned a few things that I want to share with you later. When we have time. The most important is that when you want to be a baby, I will support you." "Thank you, Mom. There is one more thing. I wanted to listen to what I have to say and do what I tell you. I think it would be wise if you wore this to school today," Sandy said as she handed her daughter a pull-up. "But why? You have not gone potty for the past 3 months and this last month it seemed like you did not even know you were going. I do not want you to wet your pants at school. So this is the solution. Keep it dry all day and tomorrow you can wear regular panties." "Okay." Sarah thought about what her mother had said. The sad thing is that it made perfect sense. She had been wondering about her level of control all morning and this seemed like a good solution. "Okay. Listen, in case it does not stay dry all day, come to the nurse's office and I will get you a new one." "Okay, Mother," Sarah said. "Now can I get dressed, please?" "Of course." And with that said, Sandy left the room. Sarah stood there for a moment. She then figured that it was better late than never and got dressed, pull-up and all. Soon she was off to school and looking forward to the next chapter in her life. Epilogue. Violet closed her notes and began to think about the summer. She had done the right thing. Sandy seemed to understand the need and Sarah seemed to accept who she was. That first day of school was a tough one, but Sarah did manage to keep her pull-up dry all day. That night she slept in regular panties and went to school the next day in them as well. The rest of Sarah's school life was like any normal teenager's. Sarah studied hard and got good grades. She dated casually and even went to her prom. As for her need to be a baby, Sarah would come home and on weekends spend one day in diapers. It seemed to be all that she needed. As for how I know all of this, well, that's another story that if I have time I will tell you. The end.